There's a conversation happening right now about men. Not always in the same room, not always in the same language, but it's there, in headlines, in algorithms, in late night arguments, in silence between people who don't quite know how to say what they mean. Words get thrown into it. Toxic masculinity, manosphere, man up. Like they're trying to fix something, or name something, or win something. But the more we use them, the less certain they can start to feel. Welcome to Frontline. Find out more about the services we offer at Risk and Resilience's website. This includes trauma-informed support, neurodiversity, substance use, mental health, reflective practice, and many more topics. Drop us a message if you want more information or you would like to collaborate. Hello, welcome to Frontline. My name is David Gill.
And I'm Andrew James.
And in this episode, we're asking the question, should we man up? Man up. It's a phrase most of us have heard. Maybe we've said it. Maybe it's been said to us. But what's it actually mean? For some, it's about resilience or strength. For others, it's something far more limiting. And in recent years, we've seen the rise of what's called toxic masculinity, and alongside it, the growth of the Manosphere. But first, over to Andrew to see how far back this really goes.
Descriptions of and attempts to codify patriarchal hierarchies can be seen in writings dating back to the ancient Greek and Roman empires. Even religious texts set out notions that women should be seen as secondary or subservient to men, the Bible going so far as to depict Eve as responsible for the downfall of humanity, through an act of temptation in an effort to establish an innate or deceitful nature. Often this has been sexualized, even fetishized as part of the misogynistic thought, as can be seen during the witch trials that spanned almost 400 years. In this period, 40 to 60,000 people were killed, 75 to 80% of them women, and the majority 40 or above. Accusations often involved lurid notions of witches being seduced by devils or tempting men into extramarital trysts, with some even being prosecuted for stealing penises. This hypersexualization of women fed into fears of male impotency and perceived loss of power or control, but also highlighted the lack of value placed on women in society, unwilling or unable to bear children. More recently, the 20th century has seen women gain the vote via the suffragette movement, though contemporary arguments against this now accepted decision included the destruction of the family unit, abandonment of marriages, and accusations of an overly emotional temperament being unsuited to such a decision. Similarly, critics of the 1960s-1970s second-wave feminism, focused in areas such as reproductive rights and workplace equality, would routinely focus on the perceived threat to the family, or attack the appearance of activists, branding them unfeminine. Again, the purpose is clear: to establish a claim that there is only one notion of how a woman should behave and negotiate socially, which aligns with the patriarchal power structure.
So Oxford's given in. After 60 years of militant agitation for her rights and 35 years of the vote, at last a girl can join the Oxford Union.
That was a clip from the BBC archives discussing about how girls were formally allowed to join the Oxford Union Society on equal terms with men. Before this historic vote passed in February 1963, women were not permitted to be members and were only able to watch debates from a designated gallery. The following is another clip from the BBC archives, entitled 6 Sides for Square, A Woman's World, originally broadcast in March 1966.
And the ability to work has coincided with a tremendous demand for female labour. Many services to free women from the home are still sadly lacking, like suitable hours, or babysitters, or nursery schools. But many women can escape the kitchen and vie with their husbands as breadwinners, and many more women will. The quiet conquest is not yet complete, but it looks to be a conquest far beyond the suffragettes' dream of equality.
The latest rise in misogyny now can be linked to instability stemming from economic inequality, population shifts, and a decline in industry seeing an end to stable, well-paid roles. This creates an environment where anger and resentment grow, and scapegoats for blame are identified, regardless of reason or fact. This, again, is nothing new, but this modern rise in misogynistic ideology is powered and accelerated by technology in a way that has never existed previously through forums and apps, making the Manosphere appear inescapable. Within this, we can identify two interconnected strands, the first being the question of who this benefits. The modern global political landscape is right-leaning. Of course, Trump is president in America once more, but there are also growing right-wing parties that formerly sat on the peripheries throughout Europe and beyond. Globally, traditional values dominate domestic policy, promoting wage disparity and employment discrimination, while domestic abuse and sexual violence are routinely trivialised or left unchecked, despite public rhetoric to the contrary. Right-leaning politics emphasises the individual over the collective, promoting an idea of the male as the protector, the leader, saving the family, depicted as wife and children, but also sometimes parents, depending on cultural norms, from external others, always seeking to destroy or debase that harmony. It also promotes tax breaks and protections for the rich, as well as reduction in regulation that would protect those less fortunate, be that employment rights, environmental protections, or discrimination laws.
The following is a clip published by The Guardian in March 2025, entitled "They Want to Feel Like Men: Why a Gen Z Men Turn to Right-Wing Politics."
Your council is broken and reform will fix it.
Englishman is sort of forgotten in a way, especially with the immigration and all of these laws coming in. Like, we're just sort of forgotten about.
But I think young people are just looking for someone to look to, not necessarily policies to look to. So when they see Nigel Farage saying, these two parties have done this to your life, your future's going to be terrible, but we're going to fix it. And Farage can speak so much louder than the Conservatives and the Labour Party can. So I think it doesn't have to necessarily be Farage, or not even a right-wing party, just a successful, popular protest party, I think, is what young people are looking for, and that's what the Reform Party is.
In order to normalise and perpetuate this position, it could be argued that social media sites such as Facebook, YouTube, Twitter and TikTok, all now owned by a select small group tied to the Trump administration, allow misogynistic material to flow unchecked through their platforms. Material that previously sat on the extreme edges of internet chat spaces, specifically to radicalise and indoctrinate young people to right-wing ideology, and with no concern for the real damage that this causes for the targets, the others, it identifies. The second connected strand is that almost invariably Manosphere promoters are grifters or scammers using their platform to profit from the very real desperations or fears of young, impressionable males. Regularly, Manosphere influencers will present themselves as paragons of a particularly juvenile view of masculinity, promoting wealth and physical strength as the only definitions of manhood. From here, some will start to offer life or fitness advice that can range from the banal to the ridiculous, but can quickly progress into more insidious and damaging content that feeds into the insecurities and invites subscribers to buy further, more extreme content, or attend courses promoting alpha male training. Alternatively, fraudulent financial products or courses, often based around crypto investing, are promoted that will guarantee any would-be investors the exact lifestyle flaunted by the influencer. These, of course, come to nothing, and were the subject of discussions during Louis Theroux's recent documentary, Inside the Manosphere. Competition for attention in these increasingly saturated spaces can be fierce and creates an outrage economy that effectively rewards the more extreme content with an audience, temporarily, then demands ever more to maintain it. This results in horrifying content being created and pushed to increasing numbers of young men seeking to normalise basic brutality and barbaric acts as a result. This can be seen at its worst in the recent sickening revelations of an online rape academy, a collection of words I never thought I would have to write or say. This shows how far online spaces have gone to embolden and solidify casual misogyny within society, to create a culture in which vile sexual violence is not just openly promoted, but now with a price point.
I was entering the Manosphere, a wild frontier of streamers whose behaviour is reshaping the culture. whose appeal has proved irresistible to hordes of young fans.
The final part of this discussion today is to talk about what we can do to fight back against this, to draw out the poison of misogyny. At times, when creating this, I've wondered if I'm the right person to speak on that. My anger and disgust for this hasn't diminished, but at times a very real sense of hopelessness can take hold around the continuation and acceleration of this, especially for younger generations. The fact is that toxic, hateful attitudes of discrimination rely on this feeling of helplessness, cultivate it even, to continue. The more fearful or emotionally withdrawn critics are, the less they fight back, allowing the harm to spread further. No, speaking out and speaking up are essential, especially for men sickened by this behaviour. It's never been enough just to know that you stand against it. You need to be actively part of the fight, or else be complicit in its continuation. Educate yourselves. Call out your friends and relatives. Model more positive and collaborative forms of masculinity for younger generations to see there are alternatives to destructive domination and selfishness. Men must be part of a positive solution to this situation because, make no mistake of it, this is a male problem, and that fact needs to be accepted without any conditions or clauses. You may not have created this situation, but you still bear responsibility for stopping it.
What you're about to hear comes from an episode of Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend from October 2022, where Conan is speaking with actor Jon Bernthal. Many people will know Bernthal for playing Frank Castle, better known as the Punisher in the Marvel Universe. What's interesting about this conversation is that the Punisher's iconic skull symbol has, over the years, been adopted by some groups as a symbol of toughness, aggression, and a particular version of masculinity. In some cases, it's even been associated with ideas linked to toxic masculinity, something that both the character's creator and Bernthal himself have spoken out against.
Equally important is being kind, is being empathetic, is to stand up for somebody who has less rights than you, somebody who's being picked on, somebody who's being put into the corner, somebody who's just sad. Getting in touch with a side of them that's softer, having the courage to do that. I had a guy on my show that I've just learned so much from, a dear friend of mine named Kevin Vance, who's a Navy SEAL and a firefighter, and just one of the just this wonderful human being, and he talks about the code of the samurai and how they knew how to fight and they knew how to use swords and they were warriors, but they also had to get in touch with their quote unquote feminine side and their ability to do calligraphy and to dance and to cook and to garden, and that these things are all equally important and to be well rounded. But again, when it's confused with being hardened or being picking on somebody or again saying it's my way or the highway, to me that reeks of such fear and such insecurity.
Yep. In addition, it also needs to be accepted that misogyny does not exist within a vacuum. Discrimination breeds discrimination, and therefore hatred along the lines of sexuality, race or religion quickly accompany gender-based anger and violence. Discrimination of all forms must be resisted, with no one group left out, because if one is allowed to be viewed as lesser, it creates conditions in which any other could fall in future. Finally, there's the question of hope. There must be a belief that things can change, that attitudes within humanity can change so that the mainstream doesn't just reject degrading and violent views, but actively seeks to protect citizens from the harms they bring. Education and legislation will go hand in hand here, dispelling the myths of male-centric history and achievement spread within these spheres, while creating hate speech and safety laws with adequate teeth to provide a real bite to those who would seek to break them. That being said, punishment and shame should not be used against individuals swept up by the Manosphere. In reality, this would likely only strengthen those ideas and notions, or push people further into the fringes, ever more susceptible to influence of that type. As hurtful and destructive as Manosphere influences are, they provide a sense of community, of belonging for lost young men who believe that society has abandoned them. Some form of alternative, real direction is necessary and must be seen as viable and achievable to provide a positive future outcome. Alongside this, the social conditions that breed such hatred must also be tackled. Rising economic inequality, misinformation and identity politics are not just fertile grounds in which discrimination can flourish, they actively rely on and encourage it in order to prosper. This provides the feared other, the enemy that seeks to take jobs, sponge from the state, ruin families and subvert established norms that can be focused on while economies are restructured in a more favourable way for an increasingly small group at the expense of the rest.
The following is a clip from the Richard Dimbleby lecture from March 2025 by Sir Gareth Southgate.
Young men are suffering. They're feeling isolated, they're grappling with their masculinity and with their broader place in society. As real-world communities and mentorship declines, young men end up withdrawing, reluctant to talk or express their emotions. They spend more time online searching for direction and are falling into unhealthy alternatives like gaming, gambling and pornography. And this void is filled by a new kind of role model who do not have the best interests at heart. These are callous, manipulative and toxic influences whose sole drive is for their own gain. They willingly trick young men into believing that success is measured by money or dominance, never showing emotion, and that the world, including women, is against them. They are as far away as you could possibly get from the role models our young men need in their lives.
When we hear the phrase toxic masculinity, it's easy for people to feel defensive, as though masculinity itself is being criticised. But that's not actually where the term came from, or what it was intended to mean. The phrase emerged during the 1980s and early 1990s through discussions with men's movements that were exploring how traditional expectations of being a man could sometimes be harmful, not just to others, but to men themselves. The concern wasn't masculinity, it was a particular version of masculinity that taught men to suppress emotions, avoid vulnerability, dominate rather than connect, and measure their worth through strength, control, or aggression. The term became much more widely known during the 2010s, particularly alongside conversations about gender-based violence, mental health, and movements such as Me Too. At its core, toxic masculinity refers to cultural expectations that can limit men and cause harm. It's not a criticism of all men or all masculine traits. It's a challenge to the idea that being a man means you have to be tough all the time, never ask for help, never show emotion, and never admit that you're struggling. In response to these conversations, several alternative ways of thinking about masculinity have emerged. One is healthy masculinity. This focuses on emotional intelligence, respect, accountability, and positive relationships. It encourages men to express vulnerability without shame, build respectful and non-violent relationships, and challenge harmful attitudes such as sexism, homophobia, and damaging peer pressures. Another is expansive masculinity. This recognises that there is no single right way to be a man. It makes space for a wide range of identities, experiences, personalities, and expressions of masculinity, including LGBTQ+ men, trans men, and men who simply don't fit traditional stereotypes. More recently, we've seen the emergence of trauma-informed masculinity. This approach recognises that rigid ideas about masculinity don't appear out of nowhere. They can be shaped by childhood experiences, trauma, emotional neglect, social conditioning, and messages passed down through families and communities. Instead of asking, what's wrong with this person, trauma-informed masculinity asks, what happened to them? It creates space for healing, reflection, empathy, and growth. Ultimately, all of these approaches share a common goal. They're not trying to get rid of masculinity, they're trying to liberate it from rigidity, harm, and silence. They offer men the opportunity to connect, contribute, care for others, and care for themselves, without feeling they have to prove their worth through dominance, emotional suppression, or suffering in silence.
It's fully appreciated that this can sound like an overly grand, possibly unrealistic lefty dream, and that's partly because it is. Or at least would be if taken as a plan that needs to happen all at once. There is absolutely a need for urgency, but steps still need to be taken and secured to enable proper, permanent change. A focus on addressing and challenging immediate environs must be first, friendship groups and immediate family, before a wider societal change can be triggered. Financial considerations too. Who we choose to spend our money with and the motivations behind those companies must also form part of this. Small steps perhaps, but the more people taking them with you, the bigger the overall distance we can cover.
Thank you for listening to this very special episode of the Frontline podcast.